even with the Dodgers knocked out of the playoffs. We bring you to a Little League field to talk about school lunch shaming and a new law signed by the governor. You're watching Unbillable. Do you have all your stuff with you?
No.
Get all your stuff.
No.
There is a problem ravaging the schools in the state of California, a problem that is growing in epic proportions. I'm standing here at a Little League field where children, elementary school children, worry about hitting baseballs and throwing people out, things that they should be worrying about. Unfortunately, in the state of California, 3/4 of the school districts are reporting unpaid student lunch debt. In other words, students are coming to school unable to pay for their school lunch, and they're going into debt when they receive that food, and then their parents don't have the money to pay for it. If you think this is just some kind of small problem, you're wrong. School districts report this number has increased 40% year over year. In other words, this is a growing problem. We have a problem in the state of California when it comes to feeding the children that are in our schools. And again, I'm standing here on a Little League field. This is the kind of thing that you would think children are worried about, but instead, they're worried about their own food. We've moved ourselves down to first base to talk about the first problem with all of this, and that is kids just don't have money for the food. I mean, the reality of the situation is that parents are sending their kids to school without food, and it can't be by choice. It's got to be a situation where they're lacking the funds, they're lacking the resources to be able to provide for their child. And this is a situation where it's really putting the child at a disadvantage. A child who's not doesn't have the food or nutrition for the day, whether that's breakfast, lunch, or frankly probably both, is not going to be able to focus and pay attention in class at the level that we seek and need in order for that child to succeed. And so you got to ask yourself an important question, which is, do we want to feed these children? Is this something we as society should care about? I mean, I think the answer is sort of obviously yes. Children, the youth, they're kind of our most vulnerable part of society. If you really think about it, they depend on the adults, the other people to take care of them. And so this is something that we do need to address. We can't just ignore the fact that these children are coming to school hungry, and we can't also just feed them without paying for it, thinking that there's going to be no cost to that. There's obviously a cost to it. So what we need to do is discuss how we're going to solve this problem, what we can do as a society, as a group, to help those hungry people, hungry children, not only be fed, but in a manner that is sustainable, something that we can take care of on a long term. And while you might be lucky enough to find like a fake coin somewhere on a baseball diamond at a Little League like we just did here, it's not going to be enough to pay for these lunches. And so you got to have some kind of long-term sustainable idea. But what you really need is to go through the entire process of education and ask yourself, are we spending our dollars in the right place? Funny thing is, we were discussing this with my receptionist, Carla, and we were talking about how you can get a grant and you can get scholarships to pay for college or university, and yet we have children that are unable to eat. You got to think, are we spending all this money where we want to spend it? Is there someone really thinking things through from a stance of allocating funds to elementary schools versus allocating funds to scholarship students in college? If you really think about it, there's a ton of teachers out there, I know a lot of them personally, who don't even have funds and resources for their own classroom, the necessary things that they need as far as pens, papers, decorations, things of that nature to have a successful classroom. And here we are basically funding all the school lunches for everybody, because you got to think from the standpoint of, if you realize you don't have to pay for the school lunch, chances are you're not going to pay for the school lunch. I don't know about you, but put yourself in your favorite, I don't know, restaurant of choice, and imagine if they told you, well, yeah, pay whatever you want. I wonder if what you would pay would always be the same or more than what they would actually charge you. Chances are it isn't. And so what I'm saying is we need to look at the budget, not just as like dollars spent to solve a problem, but the entire educational system. Do we want to spend more money at the end, college and university level, or do we want to spend that money investing in the youth at like an elementary level? At the end of the day, we should really be talking about spending this money in a budget in a wise sense, not just haphazardly sort of solving problems with this or solving problems with that. Well, California has decided that we have a solution to this. The governor actually signed a law stopping the shaming of students who can't afford to pay for their lunches. In other words, when you, a student, can't afford to pay for that school lunch, they're going to provide you a school lunch anyways. Nothing reduced, the same school lunch everyone else is getting. The old system allowed for like a reduced, a lesser of lunch. I think there's an example of like bread and a slice of cheese. That's not the law anymore. Now we're going to treat everybody the same regardless of whether they paid for it. The question that comes up again though is this sustainable long term? Is this something that we want to spend our money on? The government has decided by signing this law that it is, and so now there won't be an issue of children not being able to pay for their lunches or being singled out for getting the reduced lunch factor or anything like that. It's going to be like an all-inclusive, everybody treated equally sort of form when it comes to school lunches. And with that, we're back to home plate. To subscribe to Unbillable, click over there. And if you want to see more about what the governor of California is doing, click right there. And of course, safe!